This is the video for page 92-93. I'm doing 13 to 31. Your homework was, I'm assuming, 14 to 32 even. Okay, so you have x is less than 1 and x is greater than negative 3. So we're going to go ahead and draw our number line. Oops, first I'm going to pick a pen. You're going to go ahead and draw your number line. I'm going to go ahead and put 0 in the middle, or as close to the middle as I can get. So I've got 1, 2, and 3. And then I've got negative 1, negative 2, and negative 3. Now I'm going to use red for x is less than 1. I'm going to use blue for x is greater than negative 3. So for x is less than 1, I'm going to do an open circle here. And I'm going to do, since the variable's first, I'm going to shade in the direction of the arrow pointing. So we know an open circle is parentheses. So I'm going to shade this way, the way the arrow is pointing, right? Okay, so that one's like this. Now I'm going to use blue for the negative 3. So it's an open circle here. Now an open circle is the same as a parenthesis, and it's greater, so I'm going to shade this way. And it goes on forever. But because we're talking about and, it needs to be both. The only place that both is here to here. So the only thing covered by both is in between these two, right? So when I write my interval notation, it's a parenthesis, because that's what the graph is, from negative 3 to 1 parenthesis. So the interval notation is negative 3 to 1. Alright, here I have, I'm going to do the same thing. For x is less than or equal to negative 3, I'm going to use red. For x is greater than or equal to negative 2, I'm going to use blue. So I'm going to draw my number line. Okay, so I've got, we'll do negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. So we'll start with, this is closed dot at x is less than or equal to negative 3. Now, the variable's first, so we're going to shade the direction of the arrow, so that's this way, right? But we don't use closed dots anymore, we use brackets. So I've got a bracket here, okay? And then now we're going to switch to blue, and now we're talking closed dot here. And we're going to shade this way, because we're shading the way the arrow is pointing. Okay. And again, we use a bracket. Okay. Now, where do our graphs overlap? Well, they don't overlap. And because it's an and, they have to overlap somewhere. So if they don't overlap, then our answer here is just a big fat no solution. Okay? Because they don't overlap anywhere. So there's no solution for this graph, because in order for this to be there to be an answer, we would have to have them overlap. Okay? Now we're still doing and, so again, I'm going to go ahead and use red here and blue here. So I'm going to draw my graph. Okay, I'm going to put 0 in the middle. We'll go 1, 2, go negative 1, negative 2. Okay, we'll do red first. So I've got negative 1. It's going to be an open circle. Because the variable's first, I'm going to shade the direction that the arrow is pointing. So that's going to be this way. And we know an open circle is a parenthesis. Okay? Switch to blue. Open circle at 1. Also shading the way that the arrow is pointing. And also a parenthesis. Now, where is my overlap? My overlap is only right here, right? Because it's an and, it's all about the overlap. So my answer is going to be, all of this is my overlap, right? So my answer is from negative infinity, which is always a parenthesis, to, where does it stop? It stops at negative 1, and it's a parenthesis on the graph, so it's a parenthesis in my interval notation. So it's from negative infinity to negative 1. Okay? We're going to have to do a little bit of solving here, but that's not a problem. So we'll go ahead and subtract 1 from both sides here. So we have x is greater than or equal to 6. And, let's go ahead and solve this. We're going to add 1 to both sides, giving us 3x is greater than or equal to 6. Then we're going to divide both sides by 3, giving us x is greater than or equal to 2. So same thing, we're going to use red for this and blue for this. Let's go ahead and draw our number line. We've got 2 and 6, so I'm going to go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so red. Closed circle at 6. Variables first, so I'm going to shade the way the arrow is pointing, which is this way. And we don't use dots anymore, we use brackets, right? So there's my bracket. Blue. X is greater than or equal to 2. Closed circle at 2. Shading the way the arrow is pointing, so I'm shading this way, right? Okay. But it's a bracket, it's not a closed circle anymore. And because it's and, I need the overlap. Where's my overlap? My overlap is right here. Okay, from this point on. So I start with a bracket. Where is that bracket? It's at 6. It goes on forever to the right, which means infinity. Infinity always gets a parenthesis, so it is 6 to infinity. Okay. I'm going to have to do a little bit of solving here. So we're going to subtract 2 from both sides, giving me 4x is less than or equal to negative 12. Divide both sides by 4. X is less than or equal to negative 3. Over here, we're just going to divide both sides by 2, giving me x is less than or equal to 0. Same thing, I'm going to do red here and blue here. Okay, so I've got 0 and negative 3. So I'm going to go 1, 0, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. So start with red. I'm going to do a closed dot at negative 3. I'm going to shade the direction the arrow is pointing. And remember, we're talking about brackets here instead of closed dots. Okay? Switch to blue. We're at 0. Shade the direction the arrow is pointing. We're switching to brackets, right? So we're shading this way. Because it's and, we're talking about overlap. My overlap is right here. So if my overlap goes on forever to the left, I start at negative infinity, which always gets a parenthesis. I end at negative 3. There's a bracket on my graph, so there's a bracket on my interval notation. So it's negative infinity to negative 3. Okay, a little bit of solving here, no problem. Divide both sides by negative 2. If you divide an inequality by a negative, you need to flip the sign. It was less than, now it's greater than. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. Negative 8 divided by negative 2 is positive 4. Over here, I'm going to add 5 to both sides, giving me x is less than 10. So now I've got 4 and 10. So I'm going to go 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I'll go ahead and go red and blue. Open circle red. And I'm going to shade the way the arrow is pointing because my variable's first. So that's this way, right? Open circle blue. Shade the way the arrow is pointing. Okay. Now remember, we're switching open circle to parentheses. Now where's my overlap? My overlap is in between this time. So it's from here to here. Parenthesis on my graph starting at 4, going to 10, parenthesis on my graph. So it's from 4 to 10. Okay, now on these, you're just going to add the 6 to all 3 pieces, so be real careful there. Here it cancels. Here you get 11 is less than x, which is less than 17. So remember, we talked about these in class. If x is between these numbers, guess where your graph is going to be shaded? Probably between the numbers. Got 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. It's going to be an open circle at 11, an open circle at 17, which we now talk about as parentheses. And because x is in between these numbers, we shade in between these numbers. It's as easy as that, guys. Makes total sense. So when we go to write an interval notation, it's a parenthesis at 11, goes to 17, and then it's a parenthesis at 17. Same thing here. We're going to add 5 to all three pieces, giving me 3 is less than or equal to 3x, which is less than or equal to 12. Then you're going to divide all three pieces by 3. This is 1 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 4. Notice x is between these two numbers. So guess what? We're going to shade between those numbers. So we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. This time it's going to be closed dots, which remember are the same as brackets. Bracket, bracket. If x is written in between the numbers, we're going to shade in between the numbers. So go ahead and shade in between the numbers. Okay. So now when we go ahead and write it, bracket on the graph means bracket in our interval notation. Starts at 1, goes to 4. Bracket on the graph means bracket in interval notation. Okay. Okay, here, same thing. We're going to subtract 3 from all three sides, giving us negative 2 is less than or equal to 2/3 x, which is less than or equal to 1. Now we want to get rid of this fraction, so we're going to multiply 3 by all three pieces. You could multiply by the reciprocal, but that's going to give you a bunch of fractions, and we don't want to deal with that. So here we have negative 6 is less than or equal to 2x, because our 3's cancel, which is less than or equal to 3. Now we're going to divide by 2, which is unfortunately going to give us some fractions anyway. So we have negative 3 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 3/2. So let's go ahead and graph this. Okay. So x is between the two numbers, so we're going to shade in between the two numbers. If you're not sure, if you don't know that 3/2 is 1.5, go ahead and punch it in your calculator. Okay, so you know exactly where 3/2 goes. Punch in your calculator, 3 divided by 2. Okay, and then remember, right off to the side, 1.5, so you know what you're dealing with. Okay, so I'm going to go like this. Negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. And I'm even going to do the half tick marks on this one. Okay, so here I'm going to have a closed dot, and here I'm going to have a closed dot. Remember, closed dots are now brackets, and because x is in between the two numbers, I'm going to shade in between the two numbers, right? So shade in between them, and then write interval notation. It's a bracket on the graph, it's a bracket in my interval notation. Starts at negative 3, it ends at 3/2, bracket on my graph, bracket in my interval notation. Alright, we want to go ahead and get rid of this fraction. Multiply all three sides by 4. This 4 and this 4 cancel, leaving me negative 20 is less than or equal to negative 3x plus 1, which is less than or equal to 8. That was easy, we got rid of that fraction. Now we're going to subtract 1 from all three pieces, leaving me negative 21 is less than or equal to negative 3x, which is less than or equal to 7. Divide negative 3 by all three pieces, but when I divide by a negative, what happens? All of my pieces flip. This is a negative divided by a negative, gives me a positive 7. It was a less than symbol, now it's a greater than symbol. X, it was a less than symbol, now it's a greater than symbol. And I'm going to go ahead and bring my negative up to the numerator, which is completely fine. Negative 7/3. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and write this out. I got 7 and negative 7/3. Now, if you're not sure what negative 7/3 is, go ahead and punch it in your calculator to find out that it is negative 2.33333, so you know what you're dealing with. So I've got negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so I'm going to have it closed out on my 7. And then here's 2.5. So we'll say 2.333 is negative 2.333 is about right here. Okay. Now, x is between these two numbers. So we're going to shade in between the two numbers. Again, we're dealing with brackets. Okay. Shade in between them. Okay, common sense here, guys. If x is between them, we're going to shade in between them. So my graph starts at negative 7/3, and I have a bracket. It goes to 7, and I have a bracket there. And that's it. You guys are done with your homework. You have a great night, and I will see you tomorrow.